Good morning. I remember an occasion when I was sitting across from a woman from another culture, another country, who'd migrated to Australia with hopes of a new life, doing a new thing. She had some extended family and some people from her country that she knew, but they lived away from the big city, and she came to Sydney to experience the life and find a different way, something to do. She met a man and fell in love, and he promised her the world. They married and everything was great, happy, exciting, until it wasn't. Until the controlling, dominating side of this man emerged, and his jealous rages and his violence, and keeping her under control and gradually isolating her, keeping away from friends and family and people she knew, and even his friends, until finally he locked her in the house through the day and wouldn't let her out. She escaped a couple of times and went to refuges, and they did the right thing and applied for social security to give her support. But he had friends and contacts in social security and could always find out her details and where she lived. And he'd go and get her and find her and bring her home to where she belonged and lock her up again, sometimes even chaining her up inside the house. Well, she escaped again one more time, and this time told the story to the welfare people. And they gave her a new name and changed her a whole new identity. And then applied for social security and helped her to settle down and get on her feet. And then she would be moving back away, some distance away, to where her friends and relatives and others were. But she wanted to speak to me, a minister. She had a religious background, a Christian background, and she'd felt deep shame. Deep shame about this situation she found herself in, decisions she'd made that she felt she'd let herself and everyone else down. It was her fault. It was her fault, and people would judge her. And what would God think of her? And we talked, and I reassured her that it wasn't her fault. None of it was. She couldn't control this man who changed and become horrible, who was violent and abusive. That wasn't her. And God loved her as she was. And maybe this was the new chance that God was providing for her. And she should take it and trust that God was with her. And we prayed, and there was spirit in this woman. And I knew she'd make it. I knew she'd get there. She was spirited and a bit feisty. And as I sat opposite her, I thought of another young woman. A young woman out of a story, an ancient story that Luke tells in his story of Jesus. It's a young woman, a teenager, who finds herself pregnant and out of wedlock. And she journeys south a long distance to visit her cousin, a bit older. This cousin has not been able to bear children, but suddenly, miraculously, in this older years, is pregnant. And she visits this cousin, and the cousin Elizabeth is waiting, unsure of what she'll see and find in this cousin Mary. Will it be tears of despair and desperation, anger and rage? She's a feisty young woman. What will she get? She knows full well that a pregnant teenager who's not married is brought great shame upon herself and upon her family and her community. At best, she'll be ostracised and cast out, but in some places even killed, to save face for the family. Better to sacrifice one than to sacrifice everyone. It's a harsh world in which they live. And she fears for Mary and wonders what will greet her when Mary comes. And there she is, but there's no tears in her eyes, and her face is alight. And with their baby bumps, they awkwardly hug, and as their stomachs touch, this child in Elizabeth's womb leaps, jumps, moves, and she feels a sense of joy and excitement and wonder, and knows it comes from that one that Mary is carrying. And then Mary bursts out in this song, a song so sweet and pure that starts off low and gentle and joyful, My soul praises God, my Saviour, who looks down on me, humble me, vulnerable, looks down on me with favour and blesses me. And then it moves into this more strident, prophetic words. God who looks on the poor and the lowly and lifts us up, who brings the mighty down, who fills the hungry with food and sends the rich away empty, who turns this world upside down and subverts everything. It's deep and profound, feisty prophetic words. This Mary knows that God has looked on her with favour, this vulnerable, insignificant nobody, a pregnant teenager out of wedlock, a female in a patriarchal world. God has seen her in a poverty, in a powerlessness, and has loved her, knows her and loves her. And she is filled with joy and hope and faith and trust. She must know that her world, her life is not going to be easy, that people will shun her and look down on her. This man she's engaged to, Joseph, who seems like a really decent bloke, what will he do? It's a wonderful story into which we enter. And as I listen to this feisty, young, spirited teenager, her world opens up and I see through new eyes and I start to imagine a different world. I see the world through someone who's impoverished and on the other side. As I have in other situations, the funeral of a friend's brother in the midst of the AIDS epidemic. This is a gay man who has died of AIDS, whose death has been long and drawn out and difficult, whose partner has been by his side the whole time. And this community of predominantly gay men and women have gathered around them and around each other. And as they are shunned by society and judged by church and society and cast out and feared and loathed, they've cared for each other with deep love, profound love, and gone the extra mile, caring for each other in their illness and disease and their dying. And as I hear the stories of love and courage and hope and the religious leader who has the courage to go out into this community and to love them and to care for them and minister to them, speaks words of hope and love and God's grace to them and mercy, I'm touched and moved. And I see a world that's different through different eyes and recognise that God is in this place. And I hear and see God through these people. As I did with the funeral that I conducted for a homeless man. A man who had been in the squats and died. And whose friends had gathered around and he'd been part of their community. And as the welfare workers who gently cared for and did what they could to support these men in the squat and others on the streets, gathered the men in their grief, asked could there be a funeral for their friend, and we gathered around the graveside and we shared the simple stories, the little we knew of him. He'd had some significant job in the public service, but something had happened, some kind of a breakdown of the mind, of the being, of emotions, and he'd lost his job and ultimately through mental illness lost his family and was outcast and landed on the streets and didn't know what to do or how to live. And this other group of men, homeless men, gathered him into their community and they shared their squat with him. And they drank together to hide their pain, to dull, anaesthetise the senses and the pain. But this man was part of them. And through their tears and their mumbled words, they shared their pain, their grief, and their hope that God loved. And we could name God's love for them. And through them and their tears and their joy and their wonderful little stories and their frailty and vulnerability, I saw God reaching out in love. And I saw a different world. And I listened to Mary's song and try and imagine a different world. And when people have heard this song through the ages, it's been set to music in many different ways. Often just the first couple of verses, the church likes the first bit. My soul praises God who's looked on me with favour. And we often forget the prophetic words that come through and subvert our world. Words that have been banned in various nations at various times. In India, under colonial rule, the British banned the singing of this song in churches for fear that the masses would hear it and would be filled with hope and expectation and vision and drive and try and subvert the world as it was. It was banned in Guatemala and in Argentina under military junta and dictators who were dominating the people. And as people disappeared, children and women, mothers would put these words up, post them up, trying to give hope, rise up, this revolution of love, of subverting the order that was dominating and violent and abusive. And it was banned. And people like Oscar Romero, the Archbishop in El Salvador, took this song as a sign, as a symbol, as a vision of a prophetic hope, and proclaimed it and became the voice of the voiceless, reaching out to the powerless and speaking out against the powerful who are dominating. That's the power of this song, these words. And we imagine a world that's different, imagining a world where the homeless have somewhere to sleep and rest and that's safe and theirs. Where the hungry are filled with food and the poor get good things, not just leftovers and cast-offs. Where those who are persecuted and marginalised, those who are minorities, will be brought in and allowed to belong. Where people who have too much go away empty for a while. Us who are entitled and privileged and have too much. That we might go empty and go without for a bit so that we can learn and understand what is true and rich and deep and what life is about. Imagine a world in which people have enough and no one has too much, where violence and warfare are not the way we deal with our problems and our crises, where we look at people who are different without judgment and building barriers, but welcome them in and hear their story and learn. Imagine a world where we listen to the cries of the earth as it warms up, like a child with a fever crying out for relief, for peace. Our earth cries out under the weight of human activity and the warming of the planet. Imagine a world where all flourish and are given the chance to live in peace and hope and joy, contributing what they can and making this world a place of life and hope and joy. Because that's the vision of God, and that's the vision of Mary, and that's the song she sings, and that's what God is on about. And when you and I hear it and embrace it and are filled with her song, maybe the world, our little bit of the world at least, can change. And that can set off a chain reaction where the world can change into this vision of hope, of life for all people. And that's what Christmas is all about. It's not the story we always hear, but it's the story. Imagine a world that is full of life, hope and joy. A world that's grounded in love.